There has been a lot of clamouring for a focaccia, so I am putting together a quick demonstration on making a focaccia bread. Process largely the same as it is for all the other breads I've shown. So we're going to go through a mixing and processing kneading stage, and then the shaping and what have you will be slightly different for focaccia as it is for other products. The history of or origins of focaccia bread are that it is a traditional half bread from Italy. These breads came about when the local communities used to bake their breads communally in communal brick ovens. And to build the heat for baking a lot of loaves, they got a furious fire going in the brick ovens, in the communal ovens. Great heat, and then the idea was that that heat would just gradually cool down when they put the and to a temperature that would be right for putting the community's loaves in. And while the oven was cooling down, they baked what they called half breads, and focaccia was one of those breads. Pizza has a similar origin. So as the embers were cooling from very hot to hot, the focaccia breads would be baking there as a snack, and these became highly variated in terms of the flavour and so on that they carried. So our representation of a traditional focaccia will use 500 grams of strong white flour. Into that we have put already a lid full of yeast. That's dried active yeast. So a teaspoonful or something like that. 10 grams of salt, and I have put in fact, that's a little bit more than 100 grams of my starter, which is a wholemeal starter, wholemeal wheat starter, but that doesn't really matter. We're going to add some olive oil, so this softens down the loaf, makes it a little bit more pliable. So I'm going to put, largely a tablespoon, a pretty generous tablespoon in there. And to that we'll add about 325 mils of water. So in the usual way, just start to incorporate the hydrated starter, the very sort of liquid starter, throughout the dry flour mix here. And once I've got that into a kind of crumble, then I'm going to just start adding the water. So I'm going to make a little sort of well in the middle like that, and just start incorporating the flour and starter and yeast and salt and all that into this. Just a word on pizzas while we're talking about half breads and these kind of sort of snappy breads. The pizza, if you're going to make a pizza, you can use just a standard white bread dough, the type that I think we've made already before. Process it in the normal way, and then you're going to sort of portion out each pizza into, I guess, 150 grams, something like that. The real thing about pizzas is you want them quite thin, and you want your oven really hot. So, traditionally while you're baking in a domestic oven a loaf at, say, 220 degrees, something like that, 200 to 220, a professional pizza oven will be at about 400 Celsius. So it's really, really hot. And that's, like I said about the community ovens that were really hot when they were firing them up. So the idea really is to keep the pizza dough quite thin, and to top it, I recommend that you don't, because it's very tempting with a homemade pizza to think, I'll ladle absolutely everything that I can find in my cupboard onto this pizza and make it a mega taste experience. But actually, you find that you don't get a very good result for that. You're better off keeping it to, let's say, the tomato base and cheese, and then two, maybe three other toppings, but not too much of them. And that way, I think you'll get a much better result. Equally, what you want to be doing is putting it into a very, it's the hottest oven you can, onto a preheated baking sheet, or even a baking stone if you use one of those. So you get that real intense heat. I mean, obviously, if you can get the temperature up really high, then the baking temperature, your professional oven, the baking time is, I mean, I think last time I was out for a pizza, I asked him, I think he baked it for less than a minute or something like that. So 2 to 3 minutes. But in a domestic oven, you'll probably have to bake it for about 5 to 6. As long as you don't overladen the pizza with too many toppings, and don't make the base too thick. Right, so we've made up the, mixed everything into the focaccia dough here now. As you can probably see, it's quite a sticky dough, but I'm already feeling some of the gluten developing as I've just done that little bit of working. I'm going to let this rest for 20 minutes or so before coming back to give it its first knead, and I anticipate by that time, still in 20 minutes time, I think it'll still be quite sticky, but that's fine because we're manipulating this by hand. We can cope with the stickiness. You may find you need to give it a little bit of coating of flour on your hands just to make it easier, but not really. And then we'll process it in the usual way.